Hello, welcome in. This is the Bitcoin Escape Hatch. This is episode 4 of my Bitcoin 101 series, and this is a Bitcoin only education channel where the signals information, the outcome is financial freedom. My goal with this channel, the same as in every video, if you've watched any of the other ones, is to break down the walls of Bitcoin that make it feel like a lot when you're first learning about it. Today, as the title says, episode 4 of the Bitcoin 101 series is about mining. I put it in at 4 because I think it's very important, even for myself. When I was first learning about Bitcoin, I didn't really go too deep onto the mining stuff. All I knew is that the energy use was good and that secured the network, but I didn't actually know how any of it worked. So I am hoping to break that down for you today so that you can be further ahead if you're starting out your journey than I was when I was starting mine. If even just one person after this video or any one of my videos starts seeing Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining as a revolutionary tech, or the paradigm shift as I like to call it, then my job is done. We all know the magic number, 21 million Bitcoin, hard-coded, capped forever, and no one can ever change that. But how do the coins within that 21 million cap actually get created? Who decides who gets those coins? And why does the media keep screaming that Bitcoin is destroying the planet and boiling the oceans and using more energy than entire countries combined? We're going to cover all that today. So let's get into it. Bitcoin mining is the global, decentralized, highly competitive process that converts real-world electricity, energy, into new Bitcoin on a perfectly predictable schedule, while simultaneously making the entire network completely unhackable, uncensorable, and anti-fragile. Bitcoin mining is the process where powerful computers all over the world, the miners, compete to win the right to update the public Bitcoin record book every 10 minutes. And the winner gets paid with brand new Bitcoin and the transaction fees within that block. Bitcoin has no bank and no boss, and that's why we love it. Instead, there's one giant list of every single transaction ever. This list is copied on tens of thousands of computers around the planet called nodes, which anyone can verify for themselves, which we love, which is awesome. Every 10 minutes, we add a new page to this list. That page is called a block, and the whole thing together is the blockchain. So who gets to write the next page? The short answer is whoever is the first miner to solve a very hard, random math puzzle via the process called proof of work. Whoever completes this puzzle first gets to write the next block and gets rewarded with the newly minted Bitcoin plus all the transaction fees within that block. Proof of work, which is a very contentious topic in the crypto world, but we're going to explain why it's so important and why when you use real world energy to secure a network, it's better than anything else out there. Proof of work is Bitcoin turning real-world electricity into unbreakable truth. The only way to add a new page to the global ledger is to burn real energy, solving a puzzle so hard that faking even one page would cost billions just to do that one page, and will continue to cost billions because they would need to try to outpace the already honest running network at the same time and keep that going. It's the reason nobody can cheat that history book or the blockchain, and why a Bitcoin is the hardest, most anti-fragile money humans have ever invented, and why participating honestly in the Bitcoin network instead of trying to attack it is more beneficial in so many ways. Just think about it. If you had billions of dollars to attack Bitcoin, would you attack it or stack it? I know what I would do. Just like with gold, where you have to burn real-world energy and resources to pull the gold out of the ground, shape it, and mold it into things that people want, Bitcoin miners burn electricity to compete for the new Bitcoin, as if they're pulling the new Bitcoin out of the digital space like they were miners. They use that energy to mold and shape their attempts at guessing the correct answer to the math puzzle. Like there's a giant digital forge in the middle of the Bitcoin network somewhere in digital space. And these miners are consistently hammering away their attempts to be awarded this new Bitcoin as if they're awarded swords for spending the energy to forge their weapons of freedom. The real world cost is what makes the new coin scarce, expensive to produce, and impossible to counterfeit. Energy equals immutability. Right now, as of March 2026, the planet is guessing over 1,000 exahashes per second. That's the hash rate. You can check the live number anytime on many other places, but btc.com is highly recommended. It's wild to watch in real time, and I'll post a link to that down below. All right, now let's see how Bitcoin mining works. what the miners are doing when they try to solve these puzzles, and how they actually use the energy to do so. We'll start with how a block is actually formed. Before a miner can even start guessing the puzzle, they have to build what's called a candidate block. Think of it like packing a box before you lock it. Step 1, they gather the transactions. Miners look at the mempool. This is the waiting room of all unconfirmed transactions. And they usually pick the transactions that have the highest fees first, right? They want to still make sure they're profitable for all the energy they're spending to mine these blocks. Step 2, they build a summary fingerprint, which is called the Merkle root. They take every transaction in the block and hash it, like putting it through a blender that gives it a unique fingerprint. Then they pair those fingerprints, hash the pairs again, pair those results, and hash again. Imagine it like they're building a pyramid or family tree upward until everything boils down to one single 32-byte hash called the Merkle root. I hope you're still with me. That root is a tiny summary of every transaction in the block. If even one transaction changes later, the whole root changes, making cheating obvious. Step 3, they create a Coinbase transaction. This is the very first transaction within the block. It's special because it creates the new coins. It includes the block reward, which right now is 3.125 Bitcoin, all the fees collected from other transactions within that block, and sometimes a little message. And if you wanted to go check one of the original messages, you can do that, which is amazing. Go back to 2009, January 3rd, where Satoshi imprinted or embedded this message in the very first block. And it says, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. And it's just so pivotal, that moment on that block and that message. Anyways, continuing on. Step 4, they build a block header. This is the critical 80-byte piece miners actually hash. It has 6 things in it: the version number, the hash of the previous block, which chains everything together, the Merkle root from step 2, the timestamp, the difficulty target in a compressed form, and the nonce. Step 5. Once they've done all that and formed the block, now the real work begins. They hash the header. Miners take that header and run it through the SHA-256 hash function twice. Think of the SHA-256 hashing function like a perfect blender. Even changing one tiny thing in the input gives it a completely different output. No way to reverse it. The goal: get a hash that starts with a bunch of leading zeros, basically a number smaller than the current network target, and I hope that makes sense. Usually, the leading number of zeros is anywhere from 17 to 20, depending on the difficulty adjustment. Here's what the miners are doing second by second. They start with the nonce, which equals 0. They hash the header. They check if that hash has less than or equal to the target, which means enough leading zeros. If no, add 1 and the nonce and try again. After about 4 billion tries within a few seconds, usually less, if nothing works, they tweak something small, like the timestamp or the extra nonce in the Coinbase transaction, and reset the nonce to 0. They then repeat that trillions of times per second, which is amazing. That's why it requires so much energy. It's pure guessing. It's trial and error. They just keep trying different variations until they land on the perfect hash. No shortcut. That's why they need powerful computers. Modern miners use special chips called ASICs, and I'm sure we've all heard of that term before because the miners are called ASICs. And these machines are built for one job: SHA-256 hashing, and that's it. A good miner in 2026 might do hundreds of trillions of hashes per second while using a few kilowatts. It's like running a big space heater 24/7. It pumps out a lot of heat, but instead of just pumping out heat, that electricity turns directly into guesses that secure the network. The very first miner anywhere on Earth to find a valid hash broadcast that to the entire network. These nodes check it super fast. They rehash the header once, make sure it meets the target, validate all the transaction, and check the Merkle root. The first nodes to check this are usually the miner's peers, and they verify and relay the block within less than a second. Most nodes around the world receive and validate it within 5 to 30 seconds. Propagation across the peer-to-peer network. Consensus. Once a majority of the nodes accept it and start building the next block on top of it, it's effectively confirmed. If everything's good, they accept it, add it to their copy of the chain, and start racing to the next one. The winner gets the fresh 3.125 Bitcoin plus the fees, and the network gets more secure. A few things to remember before we move on. It's not decided by any boss or committee. It's probabilistic. The more hashing power, which uses more energy, means a higher chance, but anyone can still win. This is why Bitcoin is decentralized and anti-fragile. The more miners join, the harder it is to attack. And that's the beautiful part. Hacking Bitcoin is basically impossible once your transaction is buried just under a few blocks. Just as an example, to change an old transaction, if somebody wanted to go back and change the amount of coins that were awarded within a block that was previously completed, an attacker would have to remine every block after that. They'd have to keep the chain going, pacing the honest network forever, which would be impossible. Even with billions of dollars of equipment, they'd fall behind almost immediately. After 6 to 10 confirmations, which is roughly 1 to 2 hours, your transaction is locked in stone. The history can't be rewritten without rewriting the future, which the network won't allow in the first place. Now, let's dive into some myths about mining, because I'm sure you've heard all of them a million times. Bitcoin wastes massive energy and is terrible for the environment. Here's the truth. In March of 2026, backed by the latest Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance report, Bitcoin mining does use energy, yes. But about 52 to 56% of it is now sustainable. Roughly 42 to 45% comes from renewables like hydro, wind, solar, and geothermal, which is my favorite one. And 9 to 10% of it comes from nuclear, which is awesome. Natural gas makes up around 38% of it, much of it flared or stranded gas that would otherwise be burnt off or just wasted. Coal has dropped to just 9%, way down from 36% a few years ago. So to give you an idea how fast mining chases renewable energy. Additionally, this energy isn't wasted. The energy that miners use isn't wasted. It's the cost of making guesses that secure the entire network. It protects every Bitcoin in existence, past transaction, and the entire network. And like I just mentioned, miners are always going to chase the cheapest, most stranded power on Earth, and they turn that waste into security. The reason why they want the cheap stuff is if they can mine a Bitcoin for cheap and sell it for current day market prices, they make a big profit. But I hope they're holding on to it. Flared gas in Texas, excess hydro in Canada and Africa, volcano steam in El Salvador, they're not competing with your home electricity. They're not taking the electricity away from your home. They're creating new markets for energy that would otherwise be thrown away. Just remember that. This is why Bitcoin mining is anti-fragile. Criticism drives it into cleaner, more efficient solutions. The more people attack it, the stronger it gets. And I love that. One of the myths I wanted to take on was one I heard somebody say on a podcast, and it was a kind of a funny one because the woman who said it so confidently. It sort of went along the lines of one Bitcoin transaction costs more energy than a flight from New York to London. And so I just wanted to take that apart a little bit. So the number that they threw around, which is usually 1,100 to 1,300 kilowatts per transaction, is what Bitcoin uses. That number is not wrong, but stick with me here. That's roughly the amount of electricity an average US or Canadian household uses in 1 to 1.5 months of operation. Sounds like a lot. Yeah, until you understand how they calculate it. So here's how they did it and how they calculated this transaction, and I'm sure they probably thought that they were geniuses. They take the entire Bitcoin network's annual energy consumption, which is roughly 150 to 200 terawatts per hour right now, roughly. And they divided that number by the number of on-chain transactions that happened within that year. See where I'm going with this? That's it. That's the same as saying a single passenger on a bus uses up the entire fuel for one bus ride. You see, it doesn't quite make sense there. The bus's fuel is responsible for taking all those people to different places instead of one person to one place. It's the same with Bitcoin's transaction, plus it's securing the network, which we'll get into here. In reality, the energy miners burn secure the whole network, like I was just saying. Every single Bitcoin in existence, every past transaction, and the entire $2 trillion plus monetary system. Thousands of transactions get packed into every block. Your one transaction adds almost zero extra energy cost. Remember that. The miners are already running 24/7. They're already using that energy to secure the network. The marginal cost of one extra transaction is basically nothing. Just like adding one more rider to a bus that's already driving. A transatlantic flight from, let's say, New York to London uses roughly 500 to 900 kilowatts of energy, equivalent per passenger. So yes, the raw numbers can look similar on paper, but one gets you across the ocean while the other protects the hardest, most anti-fragile money ever created for millions of people all over the earth. And unlike the jet fuel that just gets burnt off, a huge and growing portion of Bitcoin's energy comes from power that would otherwise be wasted, like we just spoke about. Flared gas, curtailed renewables, excess hydro, miners turn that wasted energy into security. Miners are the ultimate buyers of last resort. They go anywhere on Earth for the cheapest, most stranded, or wasted power. And that flexibility is turning environmental liabilities into revenue while accelerating renewable build out. And I just want to know if you know of any airlines that are doing that, because they're probably not. Anyways, continuing on, let's show you what some of these countries are doing with this energy. Start with the United States, which is estimated to have 37.5% of the global hash rate. It is dominated by Texas's flared gas, which we've mentioned many times before, and miners who capture the methane that oil wells use to burn off. This cuts emissions dramatically while powering hundreds of megawatts that no one else would even use or wanted, which is awesome. Russia. I didn't know this, but it's estimated they have 16.4% of the global hash rate, and it's a mix of natural gas in remote fields, and I'm sure they're hiding away from their government there, and massive Siberian hydropower. And I couldn't find any more information on that. I'd like to know who's running those. As for China, and remember, China has banned Bitcoin over 20 times now, and specifically Bitcoin mining, but they still hold or have roughly 11.7% of the global hash rate, despite all those bans. And they're usually underground operations, and they continue with various sources, which is awesome. It's always going to find a way. Paraguay with 4% of the global hash rate, and I didn't know this one either, almost all pure hydroelectric, and it comes from one of the largest renewable sources on the planet, which is their massive dam. And I'm sorry if I brutalize the pronunciation of this dam, and it's called the Itaipu Dam. Hope I got that right. Moving on, Canada, Ethiopia, and Kenya all use surplus hydro from dams that would otherwise just be spilled water. There's also Bhutan, which uses runoff, which is usually excess from their rainy seasons. Then we have my favorite, which is El Salvador. Their geothermal from volcanoes, which is 100% renewable. These state-owned mines at places like Tecapa volcano, I hope I said that right too, they just hit 7,577 Bitcoin in their national stack this week. And they added 30 Bitcoin recently, all mined with zero emission steam. Zero emission steam, which is amazing. Emerging hotspots, and I'm sure there are many other places that we don't even know of or that I could find for the purpose of this video, but some of them include the UAE and Oman, bringing online natural gas and solar mixes, which makes sense, right? You'll also see wind and solar farms in the US and elsewhere pairing with mining because miners can turn off and on instantly, providing a demand response that makes intermittent renewables more profitable and grid stable. And I really like that because not a lot of people realize how inefficient wind turbines actually are. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Bitcoin mining doesn't just use energy, it actively helps stabilize electrical grids, especially in areas with a lot of wind and solar. Here's how it works so well. Miners run massive loads that can be turned on or off in seconds, sometimes under 5 to 10 seconds. Almost no other industrial customer can respond that fast. In Texas, which now hosts 37% of the global hash rate, which I said, miners participate in ERCOT's demand response programs, and this is to help grid stabilization. When the grid is under stress during a summer heat wave or the winter storms they've been having recently, miners get paid to instantly shut down or reduce power. In 2025 alone, Texas Bitcoin miners returned over 2 gigawatts of power to the grid during peak events, preventing blackouts and keeping lights on for homes and hospitals. And just think about that for a second. Think about any other power source that can do that. Like, let's be real. I'm just so surprised that something like that isn't just like in a mainstream headline everywhere. Do banks do that? Do airlines do that? No, they definitely don't. This is why you will see people say, once you get Bitcoin, you just can't go back. It's not even just like the sound money or like the self-sovereignty aspect of holding your coins in cold storage. The mining part of Bitcoin is just this revolutionary technology that's going to take us to brighter futures, which is, I believe. Let's keep going. They also do the opposite. When there's too much renewable power, wind blowing at night, or solar flooding the grid in the middle of the day, miners ramp up to soak excess electricity that would otherwise be curtailed and wasted. So you see, they protect both ends of grids when there's too much power and when there's not going to be enough power. They do this in a few different ways. They can overclock their miners, turn on more machines, or use dynamic power adjustment software, which allows them to adjust the miners' performances and fans in real time. They call this demand response in both directions. The technical term is controllable load. Grid operators love it because it's like having a giant battery without the battery costs. Frequency stays stable at 60 hertz. Renewable curtail drops, and the grid can handle more wind and solar without becoming unstable. And this is happening now, today, and it's growing every day. Miners monetize flared gas in Texas, excess hydro in Africa and South America, volcano steam in Central America, and curtailed renewables everywhere. They're not competing with the lights in your homes. They're creating new markets for energy that would be otherwise wasted. Compare that to the legacy banking system, and I always have to bring it back to that. With its branches and ATMs, data centers, armored trucks, and endless paperwork, it consumes far more energy per transaction than Bitcoin. Bitcoin secures a $2 trillion plus network with roughly 0.5 to 0.6% of the global electricity, and it's only going to get more efficient. We know that, right? And the legacy banking system, they use hundreds of terawatts of hours just to shuffle a few fiat dollars, and it's 20 questions and 10 people and approvals, and yeah, we don't want that. This is why Bitcoin mining is anti-fragile. The more criticism it gets, the more it incentivizes the cheapest, cleanest, most innovative energy solutions on Earth. Again, show me some sort of system that uses energy that can respond to electrical grid needs on both ends. It's amazing. All right, and a few things just to remember about Bitcoin mining before we finish. Mining plus proof of work turns energy into the hardest money ever created. And I hope a little bit of what we spoke about here reaffirms that for you. Over 52% of mining energy is already sustainable and rising fast. I think the official number is roughly 56%. Miners always chase the cheapest, cleanest, most stranded energy on Earth. And this is good for the planet and for the miners and their profits. Methane flaring reduction and surplus hydro, solar, wind utilization are some of the biggest environmental wins that nobody's talking about. And also, I think the grid stabilization goes in there in that point because I can't believe people aren't talking about that more. The dinosaurs don't want to believe that Bitcoin mining is actually the asteroid that's here to liberate the entire planet instead of destroy it, a metaphorical asteroid. And it's not going to boil the oceans. It's going to free the people. Countries are funding schools, hospitals, and infrastructure with volcanoes, rivers, and wasted gas. And we love that one. You do not need to mine to win. Just hold your own keys. If this video convinces even one person to stop hating on Bitcoin mining and start seeing it as the most powerful force for good on the planet right now, then my job is done. Thank you so much for being here. If you're here and you're watching this, I really appreciate it. I hope this mining video was a gentle on-ramp for you. Please, like I always say, continue your Bitcoin education journey. If you're at the point where you already have your sats in cold storage, don't just sit there, keep learning. Start talking like I did. I was just spurred into starting this channel to help more people come and see the bright, beautiful orange world that we're building here. So next up is how to buy Bitcoin. And I think that one is going to be pretty important. Again, thank you so much for being here. As always, remember, if you do decide to buy Bitcoin, send it to cold storage, take self-custody, and let the miners do what they do best. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sovereign. Peace out.